In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very pleasant day I bid to everyone, all the viewers of ETBSS2020. My name is Nur Hazwani binti Abdul Aziz, and I am today to present a research study on the impact of information technology on firm performance, an empirical study on Islamic banks in Malaysia. I am actually the corresponding author of this article together with my co-author Professor Madya Dr. Nur Rizwan Shah Muhammad Dali from Faculty of Economics and Muamalat, University Science Islam Malaysia, USIM. Without further ado, let's move to the abstract of this study. So one of the focus of advanced research in the fields of information management is the study of the interactions between information technology and firm performance. Drawing from the resource-based view theory, this paper seeks to examine the impact of information technology on firm performance in Malaysia. Resource-based view, also known as RBV, demonstrated that the resources and capabilities possessed by competing firms may differ, and these differences may be long-lasting. Thus, in this study, IT infrastructure and IT managerial have both been deemed as the firm's resources and capabilities that could help to improve performance. A questionnaire was distributed to IT department staff in selected Islamic banks in Malaysia, and the results were analysed using Smart-PLS software. This study has finally found that IT could actually significantly influence a firm's performance. The research limitation of this study is that it may not hold in different environment and industry settings, as the sample size was quite small and within the banking industry only. But nevertheless, the practical implication of this study is that for IT managers in Islamic Banks of Malaysia to consider investing more in IT resources in order to sustain competitive advantage, which will thereafter improve performance against competitors of the same industry. Now, let's go into the introduction of this study. Due to globalization of financial markets, there is a need for banks to improve their competitive advantage from many aspects in order to thrive in the climate. According to Wijayanto in 2019, competitive advantage is important in determining the performance of a firm. Hence, on that note, some scholars in previous studies proposed that IT can actually offer a competitive advantage to a firm and thus helps to improve the firm performance against its competitors. Furthermore, as we all know, IT is now even more relevant in the era of COVID-19 pandemic, whereby social distancing and staying at home policy is being practiced globally, thus forcing firms to improve their IT capabilities in order to meet the customers' expectations. Now, generally in Malaysia, conventional banks are being seen as more knowledgeable and technologically advanced than Islamic banks. Recent study by Ibrahim in 2020 has indicated that although conventional banks is more profitable than the Islamic banks, the increased presence of Islamic banks may actually lower the profitable of conventional banks. This proves that the prior study that has opined about Islamic banks are seen as competing against conventional banks rather than among themselves in the Malaysian banking climate is true. Now let's look into the resource-based view theory, the literature review on the resource-based view theory. RBV is actually found by Warner Folk in 1984, and it is actually a popular strategic management theory that recommends a firm to utilize and optimize its internal resources because they are the key drivers towards a firm's sustainable competitive advantage. RBV implies that a firm is a set of resources collected together in an administrative system, either it's tangible or intangible, and either it's human or non-human. There are basically two bases of RBV arguments that Kuhl et al. In 2016 have summarized. Number one, RBV proposes that each firm has a unique set of internal resources with their own strengths. Number two, each firm's internal resources are difficult to be obtained or imitated by other competitors in the industry because they are often used in combination with other internal resources. Hence, based on this basis, RBV has been regularly used in the study of firm performance in various industries using numerous types of internal resources. Review on IT resources. Now, Bettanoni et al. In 2013 believed that IT-related resource is a type of internal resource that is fundamental for a firm. This aligns with the suggestion by Wade and Hullen in 2014, whereby IT capability is the best resource to be tested against firm performance. Because why? Because it possesses rarity, appropriateness, non-reproducibility, and non-substitutivity characteristics that contribute to a competitive advantage of a firm. Since then, scholars such as Choi and George, McAuliffe and Beckley, and Ackerman have provided evidence that IT capabilities possess significant relationships towards firm performance. Many empirical research studies view IT capability as consisting of three types of key resources. For example, IT infrastructure, human knowledge, and human skills as part of the internal resources. Thus, in congruence with the studies by Abdul Kadir in 2016 and Yin and Yang in 2010, the IT capability of this study comprised IT infrastructure and IT managerial skill. Moving on to the literature review of IT infrastructure and IT managerial capability. Now, IT infrastructure is defined as the peripheral or hardware and software assets of a firm. It serves as the basis within a firm's technological framework that directs organizational work to meet the management needs. Further, there has been a crucial need for IT infra in firms in order to share information around and within their firms. Apart from the IT infrastructure as mentioned above, Barney has reminded us that intangible resource or capability is as equal important with a tangible resource. In regards to this, scholars such as Abdul Kadir and Abed in 2016, Oh et al. In 2014, and Yin and Yang in 2010 have all emphasized the importance of having human IT resources dimension in the study of firm performance, such as technical IT skills and the managerial IT skills. While IT can boost business performance as a valuable resource, IT physical resource alone are not able to generate sustained business performance on its own and needs to be complemented by other factors like human resources or skill related. Yin and Yang further opine that while companies may acquire technical IT skills through the recruitment of IT professionals, IT skills are often built over a long term and learning through doing, which render these experiences quite heterogeneous across companies. Now, moving on to the problem statements of this study. We have found multiple problem statements for us to kickstart this research study. Number one, there has been multiple findings on the Malaysian banking climate. While many studies show that Islamic banking has potential, there is still a proof of findings on monopoly competition by conventional banks. Hence, the results of this study could help banking managers to invest more in IT to improve the performance of Islamic banking in the industry and improve the equilibrium of competitions in Malaysian banking landscape. Number two, there are actually multiple arguments on IT as a source of firm performance. Despite the many studies on the effect of IT, there has been substantial discussions as to what is called an IT capability and how it influences firms' performance. Hence, the results of this study could help to enrich the arguments on IT as a reliable source to improve firm performance. Number three, there are multiple arguments on IT infrastructure alone can help to improve firm performance. There have been various findings on which intangible resource can be complemented with IT to improve firm performance. Hence, the results of this study could help to enrich the arguments on both intangible and tangible aspects of IT, which can improve firm performance. Last but not least, we have found out that there are actually inconclusive findings on the grouping and segregation of firm performance, because most studies only use financial performance as the measure, especially in banking performance. So the results of this study could help to enrich the arguments on IT as well as to improve firm non-financial performance. Moving on to the hypothesis. Now, the recent study by Harkati in 2020 has found out that Malaysian banking sector has been functioning under a monopoly competition and that its long-term equilibrium is more competitive with traditional banks than the Islamic banks. Further, there has not been many studies that has focused on the impact of IT against Islamic performance. Thus, taking the cue from prior scholars that have proven the potentials of Islamic banking despite it being underestimated, this research intends to understand the relationship between IT and the Islamic bank's performance. Hence, the null hypothesis is IT has a significant relationship on the Islamic bank's performance. Moving on to the next hypothesis. Since IT systems can be easily purchased or duplicated by competitors, it is often argued that IT infrastructure is unlikely to have a competitive advantage. Further, many tend to value infrastructure exclusively in terms of individual components, for example, hardware, network, platform, and database, thus ignores the synergistic advantages of IT infrastructure as a whole. Pursuant to this issue, this research focuses primarily on three aspects. Number one, the ability to provide users with acceptable levels of precision, timeliness, reliability, and confidentiality. Number two, the ability to provide universal communication and access with ample breadth and reach. Number three, the ability to tailor infrastructure to growing business needs and directions. Hence, this research positions IT infrastructure as independent variable to be tested against firm performance, which will be tested for hypothesis number one, IT infrastructure has a significant relationship on the Islamic bank's performance. Moving on to the last hypothesis. To achieve and maintain competitive advantage, which can help improve firm performance, IT infrastructure resources need to be complemented with intangible resources that reside in the firm. However, there has been an argument that the combination of various supplementary resources will create a synergy to boost performance. Organizational capabilities argue that IT resources will enhance vital organizational capabilities to boost firm efficiency. Thus, in alignment with Abdul Kadir and Abed in 2016, this research sees IT skills as an intangible resource that is defined as IT staff's ability to handle, conceive, grow, and leverage IT applications in order to help and improve other business functions. This can be tested via our last hypothesis, which is IT skills has a significant relationship on the Islamic bank's performance. Moving on to the operational definition that I've mentioned previously. Now, the first latent variable will be IT infrastructure, our independent variable. So it is actually the ability of the firm to provide systems or products with acceptable levels of precision, timeliness, reliability, and confidentiality. It becomes the universal communication and access with ample breadth and reach, and for the firm to be able to provide a tailored infrastructure to growing business needs and directions. Our second independent variable will be IT skills. The meaning is IT staff's ability to handle, conceive, grow, and leverage IT applications in order to help and improve other business functions. And the last one will be our performance as the dependent variable. Now, this is actually the non-financial performance of the firm, that is in the combination of customer-employee performance, research and development of products or services performance, and meeting the strategic objective of the firm, which is also considered as another performance. Now let's go into the methodology of this study. If you can see on the right hand side of this slide, that is actually our model of IT infrastructure and IT skill that impacts firm performance. Now if you look into the materials, a survey was developed and distributed to key informants in respective firms to gather data and quantify research model constructs. Now the survey instrument was first tested with pre-review with 2 academicians and 4 executives who gave comments on how to enhance the clarity of the measurement and questions. It was then evaluated in the small-scale analysis with 200 executives of 8 Islamic banks to analyze the statistical properties of the measure. But for the actual samples of this research, we have 1,500 respondents across 14 selected Islamic banks in Malaysia. Out of the 1,500 respondents, 1,108 respondents responded with no missing data. These respondents were all working in IT department with multiple portfolios, particularly project management office, IT governance, IT business analysis, IT operation support, and IT developers or technical. Owing to their experience with the technological and business aspects of the study, high-level executives and managers were the key targets. Respondents were asked to evaluate on a 5-point Likert scale, whereby number 1 is strongly disagree to number 5 as strongly agree. The site chosen for this research is particularly in Malaysia, using Google Form application and distributed via the WhatsApp application and emails. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, online platform is the only reliable medium to collect the response from the respondents. Next methodology is on the measurement. Hypotheses are tested using PLS SAM and specifically through the Smart-PLS software. For this research, PLS SAM is considered suitable because it allows several causal relationships between one or more independent variables and one or more dependent variables to be simultaneously calculated. All the coded indicators for every latent variables have been analyzed with model and structural measurements using its reflective and formative dimensions accordingly. The algorithm of path weighing is used to derive path coefficients, which provide standardized regression coefficients. Further, the bootstrap technique tests the structural root statistical significance. This is aligned with the PLS SAM research process guideline as summarized by Samani in 2016. If you can see the table on the right hand side of this slide, there are actually two models of reflective and formative. We have identified, based on recent study, based on previous literatures, we have identified IT infrastructure as reflective, IT skills as reflective, and thereafter performance as a formative. So this will actually impact on how we tested the validity and reliability of these variables. The first part of the data analysis is the descriptive analysis. Now, if you can see on the table, there are actually 6 ranges of age, from 20 to 25 to 51 to 60, and we can see the number of written respondents is more on the age of 31 to 35 for 332 response. In terms of work position, we can see most of them are as senior executives, or 480 respondents. And from the IT department, we can see that most of them are actually from the IT developers or technical team, of 352 respondents. In terms of tenure, majority of them are actually within the 1 to 10 years of services with the bank. Now, next is the data distribution of this study. Now, this research has actually performed an analysis on the normality of its data distribution based on the suggestion from Statstate in 2017, whereby the data distribution can be interpreted from the excess kurtosis and skewness results. Although PLS SAM doesn't require the test of data normality and can tolerate with non-normal distribution of data, it is actually encouraged for researchers to understand the distribution to ensure that there's no extreme non-normal distribution that could disrupt the results of relationship analysis of the variables. The guidance given by Statstate in 2017 is that if both skewness and kurtosis reading are 0, plus minus 0, then the data is considered a normal distribution. Broadly, the data distribution for this research is acceptable as shown on this table, whereby it is actually within the plus minus 0 of reading. For the indicators of independent variables, namely IT infrastructure and IT skill respectively, the model measurements to understand the validity and reliability is via the outer loadings, composite reliability, and average variance extracted AVE. Hare et al. In 2019 recommended outer loadings as above 0.708 as it shows that construct describe more than 50% indicators variance, thus providing acceptable in item reliability. But if you can see on the upper table of this slide for reflective indicators and construct, the outer loadings for IT skills is actually lower than 0.708. Now we try to remove these constructs, however, it does not actually increase the results of its respective AVE. Hence, according to Hare et al. In 2014, it is acceptable for the construct to be retained. Further, to analyze internal consistency reliability of reflective indicators or constructs, the composite reliability readings is used. The values between 0.70 and 0.90 are acceptable in this research as recommended by Hare et al. In 2014. To test the conversion validity of the reflective constructs or indicators, AVE must not be lower than 0.5. However, if you can see on the screen, the results of AVE for IT skills is actually lower from 0.5. But it is still acceptable because the composite reliability reading is more than 0.6 as suggested by Forner and Lacker in 1981. Now moving to the formative indicators or constructs. For the indicators of dependent variables, namely performance, the model measurements to understand the validity and reliability is via the indicator collinearity, statistical significance, and relevance of indicator weights. The indicator collinearity was tested using the variance inflation factor, VIF. The VIF readings for all the indicators or constructs under performance is lower than 5 as recommended by Hare et al. The statistical significance are all showing above 0.7. Two of the outer weigh readings for the constructs or indicators are 0. However, looking at the loading, there is no necessity to remove the indicators because the loadings are almost equivalent to 1, plus minus 1, as recommended by Hare et al. In 2019. If we can move to the results of hypothesis testing, after the validity and reliability of the variables were satisfied, the structural model needs to be tested. Now, this table summarizes the results of the structural model that helps with the hypothesis testing. If you can see, there has been a strong significant relationship between IT infrastructure towards the Islamic banking performance and IT skills towards the Islamic banking performance, which supported the hypothesis number 1 and hypothesis number 2 with p-value of more than 0.01 respectively. The effect size of the endogenous or dependent variable measured as R-square shows that the relationships are considered substantial, which complements the high T values that shows significant relationship in this hypothesis testing. Although the effect size of the exogenous or independent variables measured as F-square shows that the relationships are quite and considered weak, the high T value that shows significant relationship should suffice the hypothesis testing. Thus, with the positive and significant relationships of the variables, it is now proven that IT does have significant relationships with the Islamic banking performance as hypothesized in hypothesis null. In conclusion, this research has contributed in the empirical studies of IT and firm performance by stipulating its significant positive relationship of IT infrastructures and IT skills toward firm performance, as depicted by many previous literatures. It needs to be noted that this research was done with limitations. Number one, it was based on a full-fledged Islamic banking as well as the Islamic window of conventional banks in Malaysia. making the sample rather small. Nevertheless, the result of this study could be used to be adopted at other relevant countries such as Indonesia, who was reported having major challenge in getting customers for Islamic banks, as reported by Masnita in 2019. Second, the performance was measured based on non-financial only, on the basis that financial performance have several inconsistency or flaws in previous studies, as reported by Budianto in 2014. It is recommended that further study on IT performance is done in comparison with Islamic and conventional banking as a whole, using both financial and non-financial performance measures. Thank you so much for your attention, and I would appreciate feedback. You can always ask questions in the comments of this YouTube channel, and you can always contact me via the phone number and the email address as stated on this slide. Until then, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.